Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this talk about cryptocurrency. This is the latest webinar in our ongoing series on topics of interest to eco-socialists and to people who don't yet realize they are eco-socialists. First, I'd like to invite you all to check out System Change, Not Climate Change and its points of unity and see if you find that they match your own values. If so, please join us. That's how I learned that I am, in fact, as much an eco-socialist as I am an environmentalist or climate justice activist. I am Maura Stevens. I am a member of System Change, Not Climate Change's coordinating committee and editorial board. And today I'll be one of the presenters as well. I'm very pleased to be sharing this discussion of cryptocurrency with Yvonne Taylor and Karen Edelstein, two women whom I've long known and served with in the trenches. While none of us is an economist or a financial advisor, nor do we claim to be cryptocurrency experts. Indeed, it would be virtually impossible to be an expert on a topic so new, unknown, volatile, unregulated, speculative, morphing, and conflictive. Just this morning, I received 6 lengthy emails and video clips to watch with critical info on it. Nobody can keep up with that. But we are all longtime investigative researchers on environmental, climate, and political subjects. We have science backgrounds, and we're very experienced in public education and community organizing. Each has come to know the others more deeply through our shared fight against fracking for methane and related fossil fuel industries and infrastructures. We've battled toxic waste dumps, fracked gas pipelines, compressor stations, and many other attendant corporate abominations. I must now warn you that, as we've learned through hard experience during our opposition to fracking and other climate chaos exacerbating industries, there's already a lot of money and a lot of power in this clandestine new industry. And that means there are a lot of people who don't like what we have to say. But we must say it because we care about the future of our and other species. Yvonne Taylor will kick us off today, giving us an up-close and personal look at the dire situation unfolding along beautiful Seneca Lake, on which she lives, and in other communities around the region. Seneca is the deepest of New York's famed Finger Lakes, a real jewel of a waterway, and the drinking water source for tens of thousands of people. Yvonne is vice president of the all-volunteer Seneca Lake Guardian nonprofit organization, which is a Waterkeeper Alliance affiliate, and she's been carrying on the fight against corporate intrusions for years. Crypto is just the latest. Yvonne is also a speech-language therapist working with disabled young people. After Yvonne, we'll hear just how widely this crypto intruder has cast its net, maybe even in your own community or soon to come there, from Karen Edelstein. Karen is an environmental scientist, educator, writer, and cartographer who has brought so many corporate harms to our attention through her work with FracTracker Alliance. Her informative, accessible, interactive maps tell the human and nature stories that result from the harmful activities of the oil and gas industries. Karen's also active in many fights for a clean and sustainable environment in and around her community in central New York State. Karen's at home in the woods, fields, and in used bookstores. She's also an extraordinarily gifted gardener and a kick-ass bread baker. I'll follow up by focusing on some of the economic, political, and climate change implications. And then we'll open up to questions. We can't possibly cover everything about the system in this presentation, and I know a lot of you are sharp as tacks, so I expect this will be a rich discussion. But we do ask you to keep your questions, write them down, and get them ready to share during the Q&A. Otherwise, it gets too crowded and too hard to follow in the chat. So, and until the Q&A, we'll keep everyone's mic muted except for the speakers. So please, let's now give our attention to Yvonne Taylor of Seneca Lake Guardian. Yvonne?
Thank you so much, Maura, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with you this afternoon. Since I got elected to go first, I'm going to do my best to try and explain what the heck Bitcoin is. Some people may not be aware of it. So I'll just give like a little crypto Bitcoin 101. So Bitcoin is a form of decentralized virtual currency, meaning that it is not overseen by any traditional governing body. This form of cryptocurrency that we're most concerned about is called proof of work cryptocurrency, and it can be used to purchase goods and services or as an investment. When we think of mining, we also often think of, pitchforks and things going into the ground, but that's not the case with proof of work Bitcoin mining. Mining in this case is performed by thousands of high-powered computers that solve complex computational math problems. These problems are so complex that they cannot be solved by hand and are complicated enough to tax even incredibly powerful computers. The mining in this case is the process of creating new Bitcoin by solving these computational puzzles. Miners have become very sophisticated over the past several years, and using complex machinery to speed up mining operations is the key. Because these mathematical problems can only be solved by trial and error, and because the odds of being right in a single try are 1 in trillions, in order to be profitable, thousands of computers must run constantly in order to have the best chance of finding the key, verifying the latest transaction block, and being rewarded with the newest batch of Bitcoin. This entire process of recording transactions, solving mathematical problems, is referred to as mining. And because this mining is done using such powerful computers capable of generating thousands, millions, or even billions of hashes per second, it requires large amounts of electricity. The Bitcoin model of virtual currency uses what is called, as I said, proof of work. However, other forms of virtual currency use what's called proof of stake, for example, which uses far less energy. If using an old power plant to operate, these facilities use millions of gallons of water each day to produce their electricity. Thermoelectric power plants have been the largest water users in the United States since 1965. That water then needs to be discharged at hot temperatures. Thermal pollution discharge can increase incidences of harmful algal blooms, which is a cyanobacteria and a toxin to both humans and animals. The machines that use proof of work cryptocurrency wear out or need to be replaced by more efficient machines regularly. The average lifespan of a Bitcoin mining chip is just 1.3 years. So this creates an exponential amount of e-waste. The annual volume of e-waste from proof of work mining globally is about 30,700 metric tons, or about as much as the Netherlands produces in a year from laptops, phones, and other personal computing devices. The machines used to generate Bitcoin make about 80 decibels of noise apiece. So communities impacted by Bitcoin are often complaining about noise problems. And we know that scientists have said that noise can be harmful on both human and animal health. But perhaps the biggest concern is the carbon footprint connected with this method of cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, or proof of work cryptocurrency, is estimated to emit as much CO2 as entire countries like Argentina or Sweden and Switzerland combined. Another comparison is that proof of work crypto uses more energy than Google, Amazon, and Facebook combined. In fact, in 2018, Nature predicted that Bitcoin could single-handedly push us over that 2-degree tipping point that scientists warn us about. And here's another comparison for you. A single transaction of Bitcoin has the same amount of carbon footprint as 680,000 Visa transactions, or 51,210 hours of watching YouTube, what teenagers may call the weekend. This is a picture of Seneca Lake, the lake on which I live in the heart of the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. It's the largest freshwater body solely within New York state borders. It contains 4.2 trillion gallons of fresh water and serves as a drinking water source for over 100,000 people. Greenwich was a coal-fired power plant that had been shut down, but was resurrected, converted to burn fracked gas, and reopened originally to supply power to the public in times of high demand. Finding that not profitable, however, the owner of the plant started installing Bitcoin machines. This is a picture of the water intake pipe into the lake. It's about 2 football fields long and 7 feet in diameter. Greenwich is permitted by the DEC currently to withdraw 139 million gallons of our lake water every day, and then return it back to the lake at temperatures up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. If you'll recall, I mentioned that warm water contributes to incidences of harmful algal blooms. And in fact, on October 6th of this year, the northwestern quadrant of Seneca Lake, where this facility is located, experienced record harmful algal blooms right in that area. When the facility installed 7,900 Bitcoin machines, the air emissions at that plant increased tenfold. They now have 15,300 miners, but their ultimate goal is to have 30,000 machines operating at that facility. If Greenwich is permitted to expand, now in New York State, our bold climate law requires facilities to factor in not only their on-site emissions, but also what they call their upstream emissions. So we're talking from the drilling rig through the pipe to the facility and out the stack. And Greenwich's own calculations estimate that if they are permitted to expand, they will be emitting over 1 million tons of CO2 equivalents into the atmosphere every year. And that's just at one facility. This relatively new, little understood industry is sweeping across the United States and can be appealing to decision makers of small towns who have very little understanding of the negative environmental impacts. The Bitcoin industry searches for a stranded asset like a power plant or even an empty warehouse and promises an influx of revenue and jobs for the town. The reality is that since the machines are fully automated, this is not a major full-time job creator. But Greenwich is not, therefore, an outlier. China used to be home to about 2/3 of all crypto mining, but after the country eventually banned the practice in favor of more environmentally sustainable industries, mining didn't fade into the background, it simply moved. And one of the most robustly expanding areas for Bitcoin mining now is in New York, where the state's northern and western cities are experiencing an unexpected revival focused on cryptocurrency. But miners will go anywhere power is relatively cheap. This is a map created by our next speaker, Karen Edelstein, showing all of the retired power plants across the United States that could potentially follow the Greenwich model. And I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share with you a little clip, if I may. CBS Saturday Morning did a really comprehensive piece of coverage. I can't remember when it came out, but this will feature this little clip Professor Tony Ingraffia from Cornell University, and here's what he has to say.
The Finger Lakes region. Emissions
Can everybody
from the
hear
burning
it?
of natural gas contribute to climate change. And advocates are concerned the floodgates are about to open back up shuttered power plants across the nation. Outside of the state of New York, there are many, many more of these plants. Hundreds. And we met former Cornell University professor and natural gas expert Tony Ingraffia just a Finger Lake away, surrounded by the sounds of the university's famous clock tower.
There are 2 other plants that are now targeted in New York State to quickly open up.
He says using power plants to mine Bitcoin raises an ethical concern because of emissions of carbon dioxide and methane leakage, which is common along the supply chain leading to the plant.
Methane is, over the short term, 100 times more potent than CO2.
The UN says the best lever we have to meet our Paris goals is to reduce methane emissions now.
Firing up Bitcoin mining across the country for private enterprise without regard to social good is a really bad thing to be doing. We're at the very, very leading edge of this phenomenon of cryptocurrency mining by burning natural gas. It's going to get worse.
It's a trend that is ramping up. Bitcoin miners are making deals to utilize or even purchase power plants in Western New York, Montana, and Pennsylvania, just to name a few. And critics say the Bitcoin industry's carbon emissions are already immense, larger than the total emissions of Sweden and Switzerland combined. In fact, a recent study found that Bitcoin mining alone has the potential to catapult us past the warming targets set by the Paris Agreement.
So the bottom line is that energy-intensive, climate-busting proof-of-work cryptocurrency mining like Bitcoin is unsustainable, particularly when there are other forms of cryptocurrency that use 99.9% less energy. You could compare continuing to use proof-of-work crypto to continuing to use incandescent light bulbs when there are far more efficient alternatives available. We're not saying, or I'm not saying, I guess I'll speak for myself, to stop using light bulbs or cryptocurrency for that matter. We're just saying, let's not burn up the planet using outdated, inefficient technology. Thankfully, in New York, environmental organizations like Food and Water Watch, the Sierra Club, Earth Justice, Fossil Fuel Tompkins, and more are sounding the alarm on this energy-intensive, climate-busting issue and realizing that this is New York's top environmental concern. Elected officials like Dr. Anna Kellis, Assemblymember Dr. Anna Kellis, and Steve Otis are holding hearings to educate, inform, and hopefully adopt a moratorium on proof-of-work crypto, much like Governor Patterson did with the fracking moratorium. But we need a national and global initiative to curtail this method of digital currency if we are to achieve our climate goals. It can't be a town by town or even a state by state or country by country fight. This is a global issue that we must tackle together. Right now, we've got a bucket full of water with many holes to plug. And plugging only one, for example, in New York State, or even a few, won't solve the problem because shutting Bitcoin down in one place means they'll just unplug their machines and go somewhere else where there are no restrictions. If this industry is left unchecked, we stand very little hope of achieving our climate goals. And with that, I want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to pass it on over to Karen.
Okay, thank you so much, Yvonne. I am going to share my screen now. Alrighty, you can all see that? Okay. So Yvonne's talked both about a local story that she's dealing with very directly right in her front yard and the bigger picture. I want to zoom back a little bit and talk about another local scenario that may be instructive for any community of people who are pretty much anywhere in the world. This is a story that Yvonne Also, and Tony alluded to, of yet another coal-burning power plant that, as the crow flies, is only about 20 miles from the Greenwich facility, and a second one that's about 100 miles north. Those are called the Cayuga and Somerset plants, respectively. A decision was made about 3.5 years ago to convert both of these power plants into data centers rather than to upgrade them into to burn gas. Data centers are ubiquitous. There are literally thousands of them all over the world, and there are concentrations in Asia and in the United States and in Europe. Just zooming in a little bit here, you can see that there is certainly a concentration in the Northeast when we look at things more granularly, as well as in the California area. And these centers can store and serve up websites, they can run email and instant messaging, they provide cloud services, they enable e-commerce transaction and power online gaming and so much more. And the powerful technology of blockchain enables so many of these functions to take place. But the residents around the Cayuga power plant weren't so familiar with having such a large data center in their area and what that might mean. So there were several presentations by the power company to answer questions from policymakers and community members. So in Lansing, where the Cayuga power plant is located, we had a presentation by Jerry Goodenough, who at that time was the plant manager of Cayuga Operating and is currently the vice president of development at Hayrote Power. And he gave a very, very appealing sales pitch in May of 2019. He talked about how this data center could store large amounts of data. It could be used for artificial intelligence programming, and appealingly to the environmentally minded residents around the area, it could also help with modeling bird migration patterns and reforestation modeling. And he was adamant to say that there was no plan for Bitcoin or cryptocurrency to be happening there. He made it even a sweeter proposition by saying that the facility could be powered by hydro or solar, and that clean technology, again, got people really, really excited. Some of the comments that we heard, one from our former Assemblywoman, Barbara Lifton, it sounds like a very good project. It's my understanding that the owners are applying for hydropower. We're really excited about seeing this high-tech, carbon-free computing facility that would provide a significant and positive addition to our community. The activist community was equally excited about it, calling it good news and a great way to replace the relic of last century's dirty fossil fuel with modern technology and clean, renewable energy. And perhaps a little bit more ominously, we heard from the town supervisor where the plant is located. I'm going to try to help this business survive and get as much assessed value for the town and as many people as possible. Whatever happens after that, it's up to that business. We'll do the best we can. So that scenario, however, changed about 2 years later when, as it turned out, there were agreements that were drafted with the Security and Exchange Commission to turn these facilities and probably many others into Bitcoin mining operations, not just data centers. So at the top we have Somerset, then the Cayuga plant, and then another plant down in Pennsylvania, which has a Bitcoin facility planned that would be next to a nuclear power plant. So what is going on that led up to this switch? Well, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of what went on in the discussions behind the doors at Hayroat and its subsidiaries. However, as Yvonne alluded to also, there was a trend that was happening on the international scene. Back in September of 2019, just 2 years earlier, China had about 75% of the mining capacity for Bitcoin worldwide. And over time, as other countries started taking more on, the discussion was changing in China. And eventually, in the spring of 2021, Bitcoin mining was banned completely in China. And what happened after that, as the Chinese mining went down, and perhaps some of those Chinese operations moved to other countries, mining went up in many other countries. And by spring of this year, I think it's 35.5% of Bitcoin's hash rate was happening right within the United States. And that is a 428% increase just since the previous September. That share was followed by Kazakhstan, which as of the springtime had about 18%, Russia had about 11%, and Canada had about 9% of the Bitcoin mining happening. So this is how it plays out across the United States. As Yvonne said, close to a fifth of all of the Bitcoin mining is happening right here in New York State, followed by about 19% in Kentucky, 17% in Georgia, 14% in Texas, and 10% in Nebraska. However, this was as of October, and it is such a rapidly changing landscape, it's even hard to know. So as a mapper, I went online this week and started looking around at how to actually look at that even on a finer granular level, and to find out, looking at operations across the United States, and this is not a complete analysis yet, this is just representing my going from knowing about 3 or 4 operations to what is now about 60 from my research over the last couple of days. About 95% of those cases are mining Bitcoin, meaning they are using proof of work and lots and lots and lots of energy. So we do have these retired power plants and other electrical generating facilities that Yvonne showed this slide that I made a little bit earlier. One of the things that cryptocurrency that uses proof of work is challenged by is how to keep the machines cool. And so it is preferable to save money by putting these operations in cooler climates. Although you can see that with the previous slide showing Texas as a targeted area, it certainly would require something other than ambient air. So check out this number of retired petroleum burning plants in Alaska. This is something that I haven't seen talked about, but it is something to keep in mind, that there may be many facilities that are going to be aided by the naturally cool climate. But here's the upshot of some of my work that I did looking at these facilities. Only a handful of them were actually in decommissioned power plants. Some of them were tacked on to additional power plants. Shuttered industries such as old steel mines and paper mills were being used. Warehouses are being constructed to store the mining operations, as well as previously used warehouses that have been abandoned have miner operations that are being put in them. There's a huge business going on right now with specialized movable pods that can be installed pretty much anywhere. And if zoning regulations do not control where those can go, it could happen virtually in any place. And we're looking at that right now, even nearby to where Yvonne and I live, in Owego, where because these pods can be picked up and moved, they're not considered permanent operations, and they could go in just about any place. One of the really surprising updates that I got just this week is that the oil industry, which has been targeted by environmentalists and people concerned about climate, have pointed out that in oil fields, the amount of methane which is burned off, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner of picture, by flaring this gas that isn't used, that's a real problem for additional carbon going into the atmosphere. And it's being wasted when it could potentially be used for something else. Well, now there's a way to use it for something else. Some of these oil fields that are in incredibly remote locations are recapturing that gas that had previously been flared and setting up these Bitcoin operations right in the oil fields. So this was a huge shocker to me. And my first question was, well, wait a minute. I thought that they were supposed to be tied to the internet because they've got all of these transactions that they're making. It's the computers that need to be high powered. In the oil fields and just about anywhere, high-speed internet is not a requirement to do good Bitcoin mining. They can use satellite connections, they can use slow 3G connections, and they can still get that work done. Again, burning that gas for electricity on site, and that is incredibly troubling. There are other Bitcoin operations that are dealing also with their cooling issues by a new technology that allows the groups of mining computers to actually be immersed in tanks that sit in a proprietary liquid, and then they're cooled that way too. So there's this constant movement of figuring out different mousetraps, better mousetraps to make it more possible to set these things up anywhere. But whatever way it happens, it's still adding to an increase of carbon in the atmosphere as more and more of these mining operations go in. And at this point, there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, clanking away in the United States and worldwide. So I want to use this as a transition, and I thank Irene Weiser for her slide here, just to talk a little bit about where we can go from here to prevent an absolute climate crisis. New York State happens to be one of the states in the United States that has got very aggressive climate goals, and there are ones that we should strive for and hopefully go beyond. New York State is shooting for 70% renewable energy by 2030, 100% emission-free energy by 2040, and an 85% reduction in all greenhouse gases by 2050. So a lot of those greenhouse gases are coming from transportation and home energy use. And the rub here is that while there is upstate an abundance of hydropower, an abundance of extra energy that for the time being is easy to power these new and upcoming Bitcoin operations in Niagara Falls and other places upstate, we are going to need that energy for this critical transition to electrification as we get rid of fossil fuels. There's no two ways about it. We can't have an unlimited source of energy, and that energy that we do have needs to go towards our home needs, not a cryptocurrency craze. So There's a lot of work and a lot of discussion around alternatives to proof of work mining that's happening, but it's not in place right yet. And the responsible thing to do, in my opinion, is think about the cumulative impacts now. The beauty of cryptocurrency is that it's a decentralized method, but in that it allows us to look away from actually considering cumulative impacts, and that's where the climate harms are really going to come into place. We don't have that much time remaining on the clock, and we need to work on solutions before we let this completely spin crazily out of control. We do have the choice to be the ancestors that our descendants would be proud of, and I think about that all the time when we're doing this type of work. With that, I want to turn the presentation over to Maura Stevens, who will take a deeper dive into some of the aspects of this conversation that I think we'll see are usually left out of the conversation and discussion, and we should all be thinking about. So I'll go back to you, Maura.
Thank you, Karen and Yvonne. I know we're throwing an awful lot of info at all of you, but here's some more. I'm going to share a screen as well. First, I want to state that the entire idea of crypto as an equalizing, democratizing currency with equal access for all was so exciting and wonderful that it was so easy to fall into the dream of it. I believe that some of the originators really envisioned that digital currencies would wrest control away from the 1% and promote shared prosperity with economic stability for everybody. But we live in a capitalist society. So I'm going to start by talking about crypto's place in that unsustainable system. Proponents of crypto insist that environmentalists oppose it because we don't understand it. Well, we do understand what's most important about proof of work crypto, which is that, as Yvonne and Karen have clearly said, its environmental costs are too great at a time when we need to completely cut fossil fuel use and transition to conservation and renewable energy sources, period. But it's also a failure on social justice fronts, unlike its promise, and exactly the opposite of proponents like New York City's new mayor, Eric Adams, are saying. It further consolidates capitalist control of governments and indeed every aspect of our lives. One of the originators of cryptocurrency, Jackson Palmer, a co-creator of Dogecoin, one of the cryptocurrencies, says he had that very vision. But like me, he's come to realize these ideals couldn't last while capitalism is ascendant. He now calls cryptocurrency an inherently right-wing capitalistic technology built primarily to amplify the wealth of its proponents through a combination of tax avoidance, diminished regulatory oversight, if any, and artificially enforced scarcity. Buy something cheap and sell it high, even something that has no intrinsic value. Convince the person you sell it to that they could resell it for an even higher price. Get enough people to believe that they can resell at a higher price and keep this going, driving the price up and up, even with no value added. That's pure speculation. It has happened time and time again to gold and other things known in the capitalist world as commodities. And that's what's driving crypto. Like every other speculation of its kind, it's almost certain to end badly. You may have heard what happened in the 1630s with tulips from Holland. They were beautiful and unique to that growing region. Someone got the idea that they could be bought cheaply and sold for a big profit, not for their use as beautiful additions to surroundings, just for pure wealth generation, as it would be called today. The idea caught on. Buy bulbs, jack up the price, resell, tell the next guy to do the same, and voila, you've got a craze based on pure speculation. The price eventually got so high that the risk became enormous. Finally, some people decided, not so good. The last people who bought sold fast at as little a loss as they could, and that cascaded into a massive dump by frightened speculators. That is generally considered the very first speculative bubble. Today, if you're playing with crypto, you have to understand that it's just another wild speculation, pretty much like everything else in the world of stock markets and futures tradings and similar capitalist schemes. Just look at this slide showing the volatility of one cryptocurrency, currently still the biggest, Bitcoin, over the last year. Keep in mind that technically speaking, all fiat currencies, such as the US dollar, that are not backed by commodity, are bubbles. Their value exists only because other people think they will be accepted. When you think about it, this is sort of a giant mass hallucination, but that's actually the very basis of capitalism and markets. Currencies like the US dollar work as long as the belief holds. Economists Maurice Allais and Paul Samuelson posited that fiat currencies are essentially stable bubbles that can continue because they can be passed on to future generations. These stable bubbles are not the sort that go up and down and then crash, like the stock market did in 1929, in 1987, and 2008, and very well might happen with cryptocurrencies. Even though they're not based on a commodity, fiat currencies like the United States dollar have government support in many ways and are backed by, for example, our tax dollars and government speculative investments. Bitcoins and other currencies do not. That in itself makes the cryptos a lot shakier than national fiat currencies. Some governments, like that of economically struggling El Salvador, are propping them up and embracing them, but others, as we heard, like China, which had been the largest crypto market and is the world's emerging strongest economy, have banned them outright. Their reasons for banning them are because they're at best volatile and speculative, and at worst used in money laundering. The other stated reason is that their climate impact cost is too high. That should tell us a lot coming from a country where they can't build coal-fired plants fast enough. Like plastics pollution, newly recognized as an existential threat, crypto is intricately tied to the fossil fuel industry. And like so-called bioplastics and biodegradable plastics, as we discussed in our October webinar, it's one big greenwash. There are all sorts of schemes promising that crypto's proof of work, high energy use system will be replaced by greener, more 99% more environmentally friendly options, including proof of stake, proof of space and time, proof of whatever, becoming completely carbon neutral, recording a user's environmentally friendly actions like using rideshare to offset the cost of the crypto, and that kind of nonsense. There's a crypto climate accord that says it will move mining to renewables by 2025, 3 years from now, and get the crypto industry to carbon neutral by 2040. Well, we all know that moving our entire US economy to carbon neutrality would need to happen by 2030 to keep us from going above the danger zone. And that's just 8 years from now. And we know how close we are to that goal. Essentially, this is all a lot of claptrap, just as all the so-called carbon capture or carbon offset wheeling and dealing dished up at the recent COP26 in Glasgow. Carbon offset is an utter scam that enables governments and corporations to pretend to be doing something positive while they continue their dastardly environmental and health harming activities. Fostering this type of get out of jail free activity just enables land grabs from developing countries or indigenous lands or marginalized communities, so these creeps can engage in the buildup of factory solar farms that benefit nobody local, or so-called climate-friendly carbon capturing tree planting. Well, if you think your carbon footprint for flying in a jet to a meeting or a ski trip can be fixed by buying a carbon offset, you don't really understand the dire peril in which humankind finds itself. Privacy is another thing that should be of major concern to all of us. Sadly, most people under, say, mid-40s have no real concept of it, but it is important. And crypto has a dark side when it comes to privacy, too. It's terribly technical, so I can't really get into it. But if you're interested, you might want to watch Edward Snowden's take on it. I think there's a link in the chat coming. So getting back to a really important question for all of us is who's in control? Who's making these decisions? Clearly, as we've seen, communities like Lansing, New York, that Karen was talking about, and Yvonne's Greenwich story tell us that communities are being gobsmacked by this takeover. It's, you know, it's a bait and switch. And there's no regulation in the USA except in some isolated townships, and who knows how long they might hold up. And there's nothing, as far as I know, to protect people in Canada. We need strict, swift laws put in place to stop the willy-nilly citing of crypto operations wherever they like, which, as we see, is what's happening now. Yvonne's and Karen's testimony and the chilling video shared up front should make every town supervisor and legislator scared that this might be coming their way. The only local people who benefit are those whose palms are greased. It's not like this operation generates jobs. It's a false claim that we've heard from frackers too over the years, with an unfortunately appalling amount of success. People believed it, but it didn't materialize. The staggering amount of electricity being used by Bitcoin and other crypto operations is enough to make any environmentally conscious individual reject it out of hand, period. For those of us who've been trying to hold the line against toxic fossil fuel encroachments, there's simply no way we can support this scheme. If Bitcoin and other crypto end up growing as exponentially as they have in the few years they've existed, this kind of capitalist craze will lead to more entrenched oligarchy. Libertarians and anarchists embrace it at their peril. No one but the already very wealthy could conceivably keep up. The bubble will burst, no doubt about it. The rich are so well insulated that it won't hurt them a bit. But people like my dear entrepreneurial nephew, Dave, will be the ones paying the price. Their hoped for investment for the future, their dreams for their kids' secure future, or their own comfortable retirement will have been dashed, as have so many others in prior capitalist crashes. Okay, so what can we do? Cryptocurrencies operations must be required by enforceable laws to use 200% renewables. Think about that. This means that they use only their own on-site renewable energy sources to power their machines while simultaneously producing an equal amount of renewable energy for the public power grid. Meanwhile, the Congress must immediately enact a moratorium on cryptocurrency operations lasting a sufficient time for the industry to make its operations truly sustainable, if indeed they can be, which I actually doubt. But any country could position itself right now as a leader in this and take a strong stand against cryptocurrencies. From a capitalist standpoint, that's not such a bad deal, as it props up the modern banking and credit systems. From a competition standpoint, if China could ban it, why can't the US or Canada? And from an eco-socialist perspective, banning mining and using crypto and the use of cryptocurrencies stops both this massive emissions source and this insane new capitalist craze, both of which harm everyone in society. Because no amount of wealth based on paper or gold fiat will serve to save anyone from the ravages of climate chaos. Now, for further action, we can all take a lead from another Finger Lakes region's wonderful innovation, Ithaca Hours, a cash equivalent bartering model that's ecological and truly democratizing. It was the brainchild of the visionary Paul Glover, and it was the first modern local currency in the United States. Now there are many. They can be replicated. Ithaca Hours was based on the value of an hour of work. Every type of work, from lawyer to farm worker, rocket scientist to doula, everybody is equally valued. So let's spread the idea of local currencies nationwide. That would be one intelligent and easily replicable way toward dismantling the banking and credit system and building locally sustainable economies that can withstand coming displacement and migration crises. power outages, and weather catastrophes in ways that telecoms-driven currencies simply can't. So in New York, use Seneca Lake Guardians hotline. These links are also in the chat for you. And everywhere else, watch for announcements about plans to repurpose retired electrical generation plants and other facilities in your community. If you are an investor or you have a mutual fund or a retirement fund, talk to the person who handles that about why this is a bad bet. We still live in a capitalist society, unfortunately, and as long as we do, we have to use our funds, whatever they are, as tools. And do not accept crypto as a form of payment, especially if you're a freelancer or a contractor or an entrepreneur. And please don't invest in cryptocurrency. Instead, invest locally, like Ithaca Hours. There are all sorts of other ways to do so. And please don't be hoodwinked by industry spin claiming that this is, a great way to reduce your environmental impact or catalyze the development of renewable energy. It's really smoke and mirrors. Talk to your local and state policymakers about the impacts, help pressure them to make good laws, support the laws that are in the works in your state, if any, like New York, Anna Kels's bill in the Assembly. And we got to start pushing federal policymakers to pass, at the very least, a moratorium, but seriously, a serious moratorium with heavy fines and criminal penalties for any corporate executives and board members who are found guilty of violating it. That's something we don't talk about, but criminalization is a really important tool that we still have. We get a lot of pushback about it, but it's still possible, not everywhere. And again, if China can ban it altogether, why can't the USA? And we talk and talk about it, but we don't do anything. So this is a place to start before it takes over completely. And spread the word about the dangers. Tell your family and friends. Use the holiday season if you celebrate holidays to do that. Share this video when it's up on YouTube tomorrow. And please, use it as a tool as best you can. And as I said earlier, there's already a lot of money and a lot of power in this shady industry. And that means there are a lot of people who don't like us. But we can be strong if we stand together. Like with everything else that's based on greed, the bad guys will try to divide and conquer us on this. That's the only way we lose, separated. Together, we stand to win a sustainable future. So now we're ready to start the Q&A. I'd like to introduce my comrade, Ted Franklin, who'll be leading it. And we'd like you to drop your questions in the chat now. You can target them to any one of us or to all three of us. So thanks for your attention, and we look forward to your continuing the discussion. Over to you, Ted.
So thank you so much, Yvonne and Karen and Maura. That was a really fascinating presentation, and I think we're all now. It was sort of like a horror movie. I just don't know. I mean, it could have been a horror movie if it was made a few years ago. We wouldn't have imagined that it was, actually going to come true, and here it is upon us. So I'm looking for your questions. I have lots of my own, but I'm going to try to, as much as possible, let as many people into this conversation as we can fit in over the next half hour. And so I'll just ask one quick question. Maura, you just pointed out the value of federal legislation if we could actually get it. I mean, the Chinese have already done this. They've shut down the industry nationwide, and that seems to be the model of what's needed. What do you see are the prospects of that? And this is for any of you. I mean, I know there's some campaigns that are being discussed here, particular to New York State, and those are extremely important because you build power through local action and getting people into networks and exerting your power. But what is the possibility of exerting power at the federal level? Are there green organizations at this point that are actually trying to push? Someone dropped a link to an article by Robert Reich about how the crypto industry is trying to lobby to prevent federal regulation. And so if we could say a little more about that, because it does seem like that's really, that would be the hammer.
Well, I'll say that I don't know of such an organization. We need one. Yvonne is and is very busy building alliances particularly in New York and in Pennsylvania region, but I think she probably knows of other groups in other states. Typically, New York and California are the leaders in this type of thing. Because there doesn't seem to be, from Karen's map, so much action going on in California, possibly New York is going to be left to lead the way. Yvonne, do you want to elaborate on?
Sure. I think that New York is kind of on the cutting edge of this, but as we learn more about proof of work crypto and its rapid spread across the country, we are trying to network with other communities that are being impacted by this industry. And we are also reaching out to federal legislators to help educate and inform them about the dire situation the US will be in if we leave this industry unchecked. Just a few weeks ago, Senator Elizabeth Warren sent a letter to Greenwich asking 7 very pointed questions about the environmental impacts of their facility. I think that was a shot across the bow from her, indicating that she will be looking into this further and potentially leading the charge on introducing federal legislation. We are reaching out to other environmentally conscious decision makers across the country. And one of the things that we're proposing is, remember the Humvees, the gas guzzling Humvees that we were all a little concerned about back in the day. The federal government didn't ban Humvees, but what they did was they set a miles per gallon limit on vehicles. And so one of the things we're proposing is that is the same tack that we take with proof of work cryptocurrency, is limiting the amount of energy they can utilize, which in a sense might eliminate that industry because, as we know, it's so energy intensive.
That sort of leads into a question that we have from Simon. You mentioned that there are other cryptocurrencies, some in the presentation, that are substantially less polluting. And I think it was called proof of stake as opposed to proof, the other, the bad proof. And so if that is substantially less polluting than proof of work, why isn't that the direction that we want things to go? Or is it the direction that we want things to go? Or is that just perpetuating a scam in another way with less environmental impact?
Yeah, the only thing I can say is that there are many different forms of cryptocurrency, and proof of stake is one of them. And from what I know, it uses about 99.9% less energy. But Bitcoin is, that proof of work Bitcoin industry is certainly the largest and is capturing the market at the moment. And I'm sure Maura and Karen and potentially even Irene Weiser, who's on with us, could explain more about that.
Yeah, I'm going to put something in the chat. Thanks, Yvonne. Hi, all. I'm Irene Weiser. I'm the coordinator of Fossil Free Tompkins and one of the other organizations that's been involved in understanding and then fighting the mess that is emerging. Proof of stake is regarded as far more energy efficient. And I'm going to put in the chat a link to a type of blockchain technology that claims to be even third generation. So first generation is this proof of work,
which is very energy intensive. All of these different things are the way that proof of work or proof of stake or some of the other methods are ways to add a new block to the blockchain. And the blockchain is this immutable record of transactions that have occurred. In my opinion, and I don't, I haven't talked with the rest of the speakers today to know whether they share my opinion, but I think that there is a lot of very interesting potential for uses of proof of stake. So on this website that I'm going to send you to, about a third of the way down their site, you'll see that they have a table that compares the amount of transaction time, and most important to us, towards the bottom of this table is a comparison of the energy use per transaction. So I want to be clear, I'm not endorsing that you should invest in this type of cryptocurrency. I'm just putting it up because they have a really useful table that compares various aspects of the what they call second generation proof of stake, and their product and many others are now looking at what's being called third generation blockchain, which also uses a modified proof of stake model. In my view, there is a future for proof of stake. I'm baffled by why proof of work is able to continue, because the cost that they pay for energy, is there any useful reason for NFT art? Yes, there is. It's a bizarre concept, I get it. But ask any recording artist who has to put their stuff on other platforms in order to get paid, and the platforms take a big bite out of how much they get paid for each time their song is downloaded, whereas with a peer-to-peer network on blockchain, and ideally using a proof of stake platform, they could get paid directly. So I think that there are a lot of exciting potentials in the blockchain technology, but not using proof of work.
Thank you. Some of that went way over my head, but I'm thinking, it is a very difficult thing for us all to understand, because this is based on all these mathematical computations, and most of us aren't mathematicians. So it kind of seems like very strange that we're dealing with this. But Stanley asks that crypto seems so much like an obviously purely speculative scheme, but it grows and grows. And how do its defenders say it's safe? And I would ask a related question, like, what legitimate use is there for this? It seems like it would take currencies out of the realm of any kind of democratic control. It's while pretending to be some sort of ultra democratic form of currency, it basically means that no governments that of by and for the people could ever actually regulate it in a way that the transactions, like illegal transactions, can be prevented. So who uses it for legitimate commercial purposes? Is there any transaction going on besides ones that are basically tax avoidance and speculation?
I'll go ahead here because I want to follow up from Irene's comments about the potential for good from crypto. I don't agree. I just put in the chat a few of the claims that are being called crypto fixes for climate, creating markets for carbon removal and carbon offsets. There are dozens like this, but just some of them are claiming that they're creating a decentralized marketplace for trading environmental commodities such as carbon offsets, renewable energy credits, and so forth. Or they're creating a marketplace for carbon offsets tied to regenerative land management, taking a decentralized approach, setting up a nonprofit, encouraging participation, and working on the problem of how to create bridges between ledgers. Of course, this is all techno speak. But so much of this is about lowering the cost of carbon neutral energy by creating a competitive marketplace and blah, blah, blah. It's a market so-called market solution like carbon offsets and carbon trading, whether or not the 99.9% less energy use is actually taking place, makes me wonder why Karen has found all these new humongous sites that are going to need to be huge to continue creating new Bitcoin and cryptocurrency running operations. So I think we need to look a little deeper into this and know from our past experience, much of it, for those of us who've been in the anti-fracking and anti-fossil fuel fight for a decade or more, we have heard promises of lower emissions, green coal, methane extraction that is lower intensively energy using and so forth. So I think that if we, an industry that is growing so rapidly with clear bubbleness, and it's doing it with all these claims of this, that, and the other thing, I think we have to really put a stop to it and at least get a moratorium, as I suggested, until such time as we can ensure that this is a climate neutral industry. So that's all I'm saying. It doesn't, they're going to come up with a million different ways why we should trust them, and it'll be better. But God, haven't we learned our lesson by now? That's all I can say about it. I think it's preposterous to think that it can be done safely and in a climate friendly way.
Yeah, and Maura, a couple of things that I want to add also are that this is not an exhaustive representation of where these facilities are going to go. I'm only a couple of days into it, and so what you see as none in California may just be that I have not searched records carefully enough. The other thing that I am finding out too is that as speculative as Bitcoin is, so are the companies that are putting in these facilities and welcoming miners to come and use the space there. So that in itself may also be a bubble. So it's something to think about there as well. As in addition to all of these companies that are building computers that are specialized for the mining and constructing these high-tech pods that the computers can go into. So there's a lot of tiers of the whole phenomenon.
So we have a question from Anne, who is asking if anybody can explain the digital dollar concept. There's actually, I think, talk of creating a US-backed cryptocurrency that's floating around. And is that anything that's a real threat?
I think it is a real threat, and governments, not just the US, but other governments are exploring this. And I think it's probably way past the exploring stages, as it usually is for the public, is the last to know about it. So because this is such a capitalist wealth generator for the very wealthy, who are the ones who are making the primary decisions in concert with the corporations, I believe that we're probably behind on this. We're coming late to the table. We're not at the table, we never will be, but we're coming late to the understanding of just how big of a threat this is. And just as Yvonne and her community were completely taken by surprise, and Karen's community that she talked about were actually promised that there was no Bitcoin involved, nothing but positive help, helping agriculture become more efficient and feed more people and blah, blah, all the bullshit that they spew. They get the permit and then they do whatever the hell they want. It's just like selling your house. You put a caveat in there that they can't have an oil drill weld on your house. But once they sign the papers and they got it, they can do whatever they want. You as the former owner, legacy owner, It could be in perpetuity, something written into your deed. There's no way to enforce it, and nobody's enforcing it. So with the corporate world, it's even worse than it would be if you were just a simple homeowner. So sorry for that grim assessment.
So Joseph Wilson re-ups the question before that I asked about what legitimate purposes are being. So fiat currency
and that's-
actually has the backing of the government, whatever government is issuing the
Such
fiat
as it
currency.
is.
So
Yeah.
there's something
Yeah, right.
behind it. There's the reputation of that government and its ability to continue functioning. So that's not
Exactly.
that's not nothing. That's something.
Well, that's
But
that's why I pointed out that those have government support in many other ways. But in a case like, Brazil during the worst of the inflation, or right now, we're witnessing quite a lot of inflation in North America and elsewhere around the world, because everything that happens in North America affects the rest of the world.
I just wanted to say that some of the pushback that we received when we were trying to get a moratorium passed through the state legislature last session was that this, originally proof of work cryptocurrency, you and I could be mining Bitcoin on our laptops. And it was seen as a way for the disenfranchised who may have not been able to access the centralized banking system. It was an opportunity for the disenfranchised to potentially get ahead. And so communities of color were fighting back on us because this was their chance to, finally get out of a system that wasn't designed for them. Sadly, however, as this has grown, as you can see now, the only way to profit from Bitcoin is using thousands and thousands of machines to earn a Bitcoin. So it's no longer, I don't believe, what it was originally potentially intended to. It's not operating like it was intended to do, if that makes sense.
thank you. Well, how likely are we to succeed, Jim asks, how likely are we to succeed at getting a moratorium through Congress based on, what your experience has been in New York State with trying to get legislation passed and trying to round up politicians? And, how difficult will it be? Are the fossil fuel lobbyists interested in this? Are the gas producers interested in promoting this? Are they behind it? We face in California, we have a very powerful lobby called the Western States Petroleum Association that turns up regularly on our doorstep in all of our ecological endeavors.
Yes, I mean, I think absolutely, and Irene Weiser has pointed this out in the past, is that, as fossil fuel industries are starting to feel the crunch, right? Because here we are in the middle of a climate crisis. This is sort of their dying gasp, right? That this is their way of remaining viable. Resurrecting old power plants to mine Bitcoin. So it is a concern. However, we also have, climate change is becoming, a priority. It is obviously well accepted now that climate change is real. We were in the middle of a climate crisis. And the U.S. is responsible for, establishing bold climate laws that we have to adhere to. So my hope is that now that climate change is on the forefront of everyone's mind, as we're experiencing severe storms and severe significant weather events and, out of control forest fires, that, that argument by the fossil fuel industry may not hold as much weight. And I'm truly hoping that okay, this could be the Pollyanna in me. I'm always an idealist, but my hope is that because of those changes that we're seeing, on a federal level, there will be enough, pushback from the fossil fuel by, people who are, can see their handwriting on the wall, that this absolutely cannot continue to operate the way it is, or else we'll never achieve our climate goals. So, I'm hoping that we can get legislation passed through Congress, and I'm pushing very hard myself to work with, senators and representatives from across the country. But if anybody else wants to help out, write to your federal representatives and encourage them to look at this issue.
So, has there been any interest at this point in terms of regulation for preventing the sale of Bitcoin to people who are not sophisticated investors? I think that's so. There are some risky investments like with hedge funds where actually they're restricted. They have to like limit the promotion to non-sophisticated investors. But is there any regulation anywhere about who can buy into Bitcoin?
I'm not seeing it anywhere. I think it was even, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else saw this, but I think even Burger King was accepting Bitcoin in some of their stores. So yeah, there's no regulation at all.
And I'm a gig worker, as we're called, a freelancer. I get, contractor. One of the recent employers that I tried to start working for pays only in Bitcoin. So I could not accept that. And another one pays only in PayPal. And on the PayPal homepage, when I went in to get my payment, I was greeted with a thing that said, switch to Bitcoin. So it's everywhere. And we, as I said, we're behind. We have got a lot to catch up on, and we have to work on legislators in every state, not just New York, but New York is leading the way, and we should, ride on Yvonne and company's coattails and follow what they're suggesting, because they've laid the groundwork, and we can build on that. And there are also, there's community home rule precedent that has worked in other in various states to protect communities. Those things are falling by the wayside, but there are still options to use home rule successfully, I think, in some
You're
cases.
saying that what we have to defend against is the environmental destruction. And it sounds to me, I see that there's a note about Jamie Dimon doesn't approve of this currency. So I'm wondering if he's just worried that somebody else will take over the high positions that the rich have. But in the meantime, it's not a matter of protecting the small person. I think the small person has not nearly of the resource necessary to begin to engage in it. You don't need just $5 bill or something. I think you need maybe $10,000 to start or something.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry, my picture isn't showing. I can't get it
That's
to
okay.
function.
So I see that Joseph has said, I don't know if this has been touched on. Well, it has a little bit been touched on, but I don't see any of the big greens getting involved in this at this point. And Susanna says, here. So what can we do to try to actually get more interest on the part of the big greens in taking on this kind of a fight at the national level? Is there a way we can lobby them?
I think if you're a member of any of these, bigger national environmental watchdog organizations, you should reach out to them by the masses and encourage them to address this issue. I know that Elizabeth Warren's frustration was that she presented on proof of work crypto to some of the national organizations to get buy-in, and she got very little response. So
On that one point, this is Ken Camera. I'm sorry. I don't know if this is still true, but I've been a member of Greenpeace for a long time, I think on and off. And about, I would say 3 or 4 months ago, I got a solicitation to renew and to sign up. And they said you could pay in cryptocurrency to your dues. So I took the letter from the executive director, I can't remember her name, and I wrote a personal note to her, and I said I'd never re-up with an organization that's involved with Bitcoin like yourselves. This is ridiculous, and it's funny, but I don't know if you all kind of look like there's a few old people in the group, and I don't know how many of you get a big stack of mail every day that asks you to send in a contribution to something, but I get at least a pound of mail every day. And for probably a couple of months, I'd send back the letter asking for a donation and say, please take me off your mailing list. And of course, nobody ever does. So I'm waiting for Greenpeace to ask me again, and I want to see if things have changed there. But I think we have to take them all on individually and just make it part of our daily routine, and so I appreciate the materials that you ladies have put together. I think we have to sort of scrape stuff from all of this information and come up with one kind of presentation we can all use over and over again. Say, Bitcoin is this, Bitcoin is not this. Bitcoin is this, Bitcoin is not this. We have to create some kind of a binary thing that's a list that will, I think, touch a lot of different people from their different perspectives. I mean, certainly it's social injustice. That's one thing. Besides being that, so that's my little speech. Apologize for that.
You're
Thank
right.
you.
We need
I
some
think it was a
talking
good
points.
little speech. Thank you. And Mary Finneran, do you have something to say here? I see the hand
Yeah,
up.
I do. I just want to say we were at this event yesterday in New York City, and the legislator who was the keynote speaker, I think Ann mentioned it, but she totally dissed the enviro. She was totally pushing Bitcoin. And she said, and she mentioned the Sierra Club specifically, that they were fighting this and that they really didn't know what they were talking about. You can see there's a recording of the whole thing. And she was, she helped write the CLCPA. She fought the Williams Pipeline. So, but the big greens for the most part aren't. But I will say the Sierra Club, the Atlantic chapter, can't fight anything without a nod from the national. So the nod is allowing them to do that, but they haven't really come out themselves against it, but they're allowing New York State. They allowed us to ban fracking. I mean, they allowed the Sierra Club to support banning fracking. So we still need to push these people a lot. And but I was floored when Sabino said the enviros her, and she was really kind of, I think she was trying to keep us from saying anything. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'm really sorry I missed most of this because I just.
Well, it'll be up, on our YouTube channel.
Thank you, Ted.
Either tomorrow or the day after, but it'll be up there very soon. And I see, I'm going to give Fred Pfeiffer, you're going to get the last word here. Hope you have some words of wisdom for us. But we really, we'll can stick around for further discussion, but we're going to close the formal proceedings soon. Go ahead, Fred.
This has been a great presentation, great viewpoints. I think we have to unite the many to defeat the few. And I think that working on the ecological devastation of proof of work and Bitcoin is the pressure point we need to push now as we educate ourselves and try to figure out the impact of cryptocurrency. As you probably know, we have fiat currency, which was mentioned before by another speaker. The reason that the government regulates our currency is because we had private banks that went bust in the 1800s, and we needed a national regulatory body. And other countries have done the same. Some have been successful. Some have had suffered huge inflation and devaluation of their currencies. That's a big thing to try to understand. So let's just go stop this proof of work, raping the environment for cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, and then we'll take up the other issues as we go along. And thanks a lot for my chance to have a voice here.
Thank you, Fred. And I think those are great words to end with here in terms of our mission going forward. And we're going to wrap up the recording. Thanks again to Yvonne Taylor of Gas Free Seneca and Seneca Lake Guardian, Karen Edelstein from FracTracker Alliance, and Maura Stevens from System Change, Not Climate Change. If you found this presentation to be enlightening and useful, please tell your friends to look for the video on our YouTube channel at